Hi, I'm Bill Marshall. This is Judicial Watch's Inside Report. I'm a senior investigator here at Judicial Watch, and I am pleased, very pleased, to have as a guest today a phenomenal investigative reporter. He was a senior editor at PJ Media for 10 years. His name is David Steinberg. David has done yeoman's work in looking into the background of Representative Ilhan Omar and her very interesting, shall we say, familial relationships. David has been working, looking into the background of Representative Omar, along with two colleagues in Minneapolis named Priya Samsundar and Scott Johnson of Powerline Blog. And he's uncovered amazing information about a sitting congresswoman. David, thank you very much for joining us today on the program.
Great. Thanks for having me, Bill. I'm very impressed with Judicial Watch on this issue. What you did last week and finally stepping forward and bringing this to the attention of Congress is it's a big help. It's been 3 years of this story being essentially ignored, but the attorneys and your record over there and definitely winning all these cases lately regarding the Russia investigation and Clinton and the emails and the subpoenas and the FOIAs, it really brings a lot of credibility that I've been waiting for a while. So I definitely appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for that, David. In fact, I used your reporting largely. I was largely responsible for drafting the complaint that Judicial Watch filed with the Office of Congressional Ethics about the numerous felonies that we believe Representative Omar has committed, and I largely based my complaint off of your reporting. I'd like to begin, if I could, with sort of a primer, if you could provide me one, with about the issues surrounding Representative Omar and her alleged marriage to her biological brother, Ahmed Elmi.
Well, the issues here, I've been stressing with every media hit I've done since July 18th, when I published a large amount of information moving this story forwards, is that the issues with her are secondary to what I hope the public takes from this. This is an issue of media failure. This did not have to happen. Ilhan Omar right now is a national story, a national disgrace, many Americans will say. It's an international story. We've seen a corroborating uptick in anti-Semitic crime since she's been on the scene. This is a major embarrassment. This is a turning point for our nation, and none of this had to happen. This was an open and shut case worth investigating back in August of 2016, and every day the media has done the exact wrong thing in following up and deciding how to cover this issue. That is what really matters here. As far as the details here, we're talking about a potential marriage to her sibling in 2009. And the motivations appear to be immigration fraud, perhaps student loan fraud, and perhaps tax fraud. She also committed perjury in the carrying out of this, and it lasted for 8 years. This marriage was legal for 8 years. And it was also in 2 states. They lived in North Dakota. They lived in Minnesota during this time. We are talking about such a large number of potential felonies here related to this marriage that this could possibly be the worst case of corruption, criminality by an elected official, especially a congressperson, in our lifetimes. I mean, I certainly cannot think of one besides James Traficant, but I mean, this, considering how this story has had relevance worldwide, I certainly think this is going to end up topping it.
So take me back a little bit. Now, I want to commend to our audience. I want to commend to our audience this article that you published on July 18th of this year, which is it's David Steinberg subtitled "Tying Up Loose Threads in the Curious Case," and it was published by Powerline blog. It was published in a number of outlets, as I recall. And it does, and I've been an investigator for over 30 years in the government and private sector, now for Judicial Watch for a number of years. And I got to say, and I think I told you on the day this came out, this is the best public records-based investigation I think I've ever seen. And more importantly, the way you've laid it out so cogently in this article makes it a somewhat convoluted story very easy to understand. I mean, it boils down, as I said in the complaint we filed, it boils down to a very simple issue. A person appears to have married, a congresswoman appears to have married her sibling as part of an immigration fraud scheme. And this is so topical and so timely right now with all the debate about immigration in this country that I cannot recommend this, again, this article highly enough to our audience. David Steinberg, Tying Up Loose Threads in the Curious Case. And you've actually, was this not, I think this was the fifth segment, right, in a series of articles you've done on Congressman Omar?
Yes. First of all, thanks for the high praise. I absolutely appreciate that coming from Judicial Watch. This was the fifth or sixth column I wrote that included evidence that I was breaking. I've written a couple others on media response to it and other commentary surrounding the issue. But I believe there were 5 or 6 articles that included evidence I had exclusively found and was breaking. Additionally, I'd request that all listeners head back to look at the articles from Scott Johnson in August of 2016 on PowerlineBlog.com and Preya Samsundar at Alpha News Minnesota back in starting in August of 2016 as well. And she wrote several more over the next 4 or 5 months.
Right. Preya
and want to, yes.
Yep.
There's about 10 articles here I would recommend reading.
Right.
There's my 5 or 6 and theirs.
Right. Preya and I had actually for years been talking about her work out in Minneapolis, and it's just really, really important with the work that she's been doing as well as Scott. But just give us, if you could, a very brief sort of thumbnail of the whole issue about Somalis coming to the United States, right? It all kind of stems from the whole Black Hawk Down incident in 1993, I believe. We then created this special class of refugees that is specific to Somalia, who are allowed to come to our country, under a special status, right? And what the State Department eventually found was that the vast majority of something like 87% of Somalis who are claiming refugee status, they had to have an anchor, right? They had to have somebody in the United States who was a relative, right? And they were finding through DNA analysis that something like 87% of Somalis were lying about being related to someone here in the United States. Is that not basically? Yes,
this was the Priority 3 program by the State Department, Priority 3 Refugee Family Reunification Program. The Somali, these refugees, primarily Somalis, but other East Africans, were in these camps in Kenya, and they were escaping the worst place on earth. 1991, 1995. Those years were when Ilhan was a child living in those refugee camps. Now, during that time, and from the early 90s, and then there were another few waves later on in the early 2000s, we took in thousands upon thousands of Somalis, and now they're scattered across a few spots in the United States. Virginia, just around D.C., there are some communities, and this community in Minneapolis is the major one, of course. Now, we have had the country has had terrible problems with terror recruitment, with gang issues, entirely from these Somali communities that are extremely insular. They've had policing issues. Now, look, this whole issue shows the flaws in designing an immigration program, refugee program, based purely on emotion. We didn't want people getting, we would have taken as many people as we could to save them from the hell of Somalia. Obviously, what happened after that is that because we were so lax, we were taking in, according to those DNA tests, which were taken during the George W. Bush era, I believe 2006, it turned out that up to 87% of family applicants from that region were fraudulently claiming genetic relations. And they did entirely shut down the program for a long time after that. It was reopened by Obama, of course. Now, the results of this this emotion-based rush to get as many people over here as we could, get them out of that area, has been a large problem that at this point does not appear to be solvable. We have, not only do we have the usual cultural issues of bringing over a large population from a Muslim country that is not used to or willing to live under the laws we're used to in most Western countries. That's part of the issue. We also have people from those countries who would otherwise be wonderful integrated citizens, just perfect new Americans, which is exactly what we want from our immigration policies, who are not able to do so because they arrived here under false names and fraudulently. Applying for a job, anything could incriminate several members of the family. It's a terrible problem that never goes away. They want to integrate, they can't integrate. And then we have some who don't want to integrate. We have no means of knowing who they are, tracking their past. We just simply don't have a way of solving this problem.
Right, which kind of brings us to the Omar family, right? So they come over here. This is Ilhan and her father and her, I believe, one sibling, a sister, come over to the United States in 2008 via a refugee camp in Kenya, right?
1995.
Oh, okay, right, 1995, and then half the family, that is, the other half of her family, emigrates to the United Kingdom, right? And they keep the last name Elmi,
right?
Whereas Ilhan and her father and sister adopt the name Omar, which is the fraudulent name that is they claim to be members of the Omar family already residing here in the United States as part of this immigration fraud.
Yeah, to start with, Ilhan Abdullahi Omar, your congresswoman, is actually Ilhan Nur Saeed Elmi. That's her name. She came over when she was 12 years old. Her father and Ilhan and 4 other of her siblings come over. Are in this refugee camp in Kenya in 1995. A second family, the Omars. I know the names of several of them, perhaps all of them. I've only released the relevant ones, which is Abdullahi Omar and Ahmed Omar. This second family, which was it was part of her tribe. It wasn't an entirely disconnected family. It was part of her tribe, and they were in this refugee camp together. The Omars, I believe, were qualified for this Priority 3 program. They had a family member, I don't know if a fraudulent family member or a legitimate one, already in the United States. And the Omars were in the process of coming over and being granted asylum. The Omars allowed Ilhan's father, Ilhan, and one sister, Sarah, she goes by Sarah Noor now, to fraudulently say they were members of the Omars, and they came to the United States as fake members of this Omar family. Now, I don't know exactly why only those 3 had come as part of the Omars. I do know that the remaining 3 siblings used their real names and were granted asylum in the United Kingdom just around the same time. So they all made it out, but they did split up.
Okay, so that was 1994, 95. Then fast forward to 2000. Well, let me back up a second. Her brother, or her presumed brother / husband, Ahmed Elmi, he went to high school here in the States, didn't he? In 2002, 2003, graduate.
Yes, he came over to the United States. Let me back up a bit. Ilhan was 12 years old when she arrived. He's 2 years younger. So he gets to the United Kingdom. He's 10 years old. And their mother passed away in Somalia in 1985. So when he arrived in the United Kingdom, he has neither parent there with him. He is raised during his teenage years until he's 17 by the older sister, who's Layla Elmi. She was 10 or 11 years older. She was 23 when they arrived in the UK, and she was essentially what they refer to in the United Kingdom as a family or friend's carer. And that was the arrangement they had. That's how he was raised.
Right. And yeah. In fact, he refers to her as mom, and she refers to him as son, if I recall from your article.
That is how they refer to themselves. I mean, there were dozens of instances over the years that they were in contact over social media. But even just a few months ago, they were referring to themselves as mom and son. And that's just it was just commonplace. But she's not his mother. She was only 11 years older. She was certainly not his mother. And but she did raise him. She didn't have official custody. She didn't adopt him, which wasn't necessary under the UK laws. But she did raise him. Now, so he's being raised there. When he's 17, for reasons not entirely clear, he comes to the United States on a program that allows foreign students to attend a public school in the United States for 1 year if the parent is footing the bill. So you can attend the school, but the parent did have to pay some tuition, as if it was a private school.
Right.
Now, so he comes at age 17, just for 1 year, gets his diploma from an American high school. Presumably, the point was to get a diploma from an American high school. I don't know why they chose this as a better option than the school he had been attending in London, but he does come over and graduate, attends high school in the United States only for 1 year. And reportedly, I have the address where he presumably lived at this time. I've not been able to confirm it because such information, he was a minor for most of this time. He was 17. So this information can't legally be released to me. But while he attended this school, his parent on his school registration form was Ilhan's parent. So for a year, he was legally the child of Ilhan's father.
Right.
Now,
okay.
This I have not been able to confirm yet, but this is what several sources have explained to me.
Okay. So then does he then go back to the UK after he graduates from high school in America? Is that?
Correct. He stays for about a year and returns to the UK. The next time we hear from him in the United States is 2009, when he is now 25 years old. He's been a UK citizen for a long time. Ilhan is now, she's 27. She's been a United States citizen for 9 years, since 2000. There is no, I want to stress this because people who just are coming to the story casually have objected to the fact that I'm judging what people did to escape Somalia. If you're a casual listener and have no introduction to this story, I want to be clear. This was, at this point, Ilhan had been a U.S. citizen for 9 years, and he had been living in London, also a citizen, for several years. She's 27, he's 25. This is when they get married. He comes to the United States in 2009. They are married by a Christian pastor in Minnesota. And he, a couple months later, both he and Ilhan move to Fargo, North Dakota, and they enroll at North Dakota State University.
Right. Which brings us to the whole other issue you raised, and you've raised in your article about possible student loan fraud. It would be very interesting to know if he was getting student loans, because that could be, you could implicate student loan fraud in this whole story if he's lying, if he's essentially deriving derivative benefits from this initial fraud, this marriage fraud, which...
Correct.
Okay.
Now, it does certainly appear that coming to the United States, getting that green card as soon as possible, which he was allowed to do if they got married, but which could have taken several years if he had just come legally as a relative of Ilhan. Because of the swiftness, it was just a few months later. It does appear that coming and being able to go to college was part of the motive. I've also heard from several people he had intended to stay in the U.S. long term, but after 2 years at the college, he did return in 2012, actually, to London. So immigration fraud, student loan fraud, because if they're married and they're applying and they're submitting a FAFSA form, federal student aid form, the FAFSA form, they would no longer their father's assets would not be included while calculating the loan they received.
Right.
They were both in public housing at the time, penniless. So obviously they were going to receive a better deal married than not married.
Which actually brings in this whole other issue that's in the news lately about college admissions fraud. That is financial fraud. Of parents. I'm sure you've seen the reporting in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere lately, where parents are giving their guardianship of their children over to poorer relatives, so that they can derive more federal and state financial aid.
Yes, it seems. It just seems here, as we're discussing her in terms of her character, that there isn't a situation where, among all this time, where she didn't choose the available, the easy way of committing fraud as her way of getting through that situation. Right. Now, because first we have this attending college, and then we have the many. I believe we're up to 8 confirmed campaign finance violations. We have her in 2014, 2015, illegally applying jointly on her taxes. It just seems like at every step in her life, she chooses an illegal way of making it easier.
Great. What we need in our congressman, right? We're getting a little on time. So I want to bring in Ahmed Hirsi. Okay, so she's married to her brother, her ostensible one, we believe her brother, in 2008, right?
Correct.
And then she marries this other individual, Ahmed Hirsi. She likes people with the name Ahmed, I guess. Who she claims is, and she does that, I guess, in 2011?
Well, this is where her bizarre, convoluted explanation as to what was actually going on with these two men. It was accepted by the media. She gave this explanation back in 2016, but none of it made sense. The truth is that back in 2002. She marries Ahmed Hirsi, according to her religious traditions. They have an Islamic ceremony back in 2002. They move in together. Shortly thereafter, she has children. By 2009, she has 2 children. And she says that she divorces Ahmed Hirsi at this point, shortly before she legally marries Ahmed Elmi. Of course, it doesn't happen because all 3 of them had moved to North Dakota along with the children. There is no separation between Ilhan Omar and Ahmed Hirsi from 2002 until just a couple months ago. They are a married couple, living together, raising children for 18 years. Now, in the middle of that, she marries Ahmed Elmi legally,
her brother,
and then divorces him. Then divorces him legally in 2017. And a month after divorcing him legally, she finally legally marries Hirsi in January of 2018.
So bigamy might be another issue here for Congressman Omar.
Yes, we certainly have bigamy being a potential issue because there was a man who, it was common law, yes, but she was using his name on tax forms. She was claiming this man to be her husband. So certainly a case can be made that she has committed bigamy as well,
Right.
even though she wasn't legally married to Hersey.
Which brings us to another issue in that a lot of people, I think, are unaware of this, was that she was investigated by the state of Minnesota Campaign Finance Board, right, and found to be
Right.
guilty of filing false tax returns, filing illegal joint tax returns with this man, Ahmed Hersey, who was not legally her husband at the time in 2014 and 2015.
Correct.
So,
In short, you filed jointly with a person you're legally married to. There was no common law marriage in Minnesota. A couple states allow it, but you simply do not. You can only file jointly to someone you are legally married to. She filed jointly with Ahmed Hersey for at least 2 years, possibly 8. So we are really racking up the felonies here, and those are the only 2 we know of so far that are confirmed.
I can't imagine a case, having come out of many years ago, a federal law enforcement background, but I can't imagine a case that does not cry out for an official government investigation, criminal investigation of this woman at this point. I mean, just based on the probable cause that you've unearthed, you and Preya and Scott Johnson have unearthed in your 3-year-long investigation. Have you talked to any prosecutors or federal agents, about initiating or about having them initiate a criminal investigation of Congressman Omar?
Last year, I did contact the Minnesota branch of the federal DOJ, Minnesota Attorney General, and offered to share all information I had with them, knowing that it is a serious crime to share false information with the Department of Justice. I did make that offer. I publicized it. I wrote about it, that I had offered all the information. Never heard back. Now I'm told that they're certainly not able to announce publicly if an investigation is open or not. I'm told if someone reaches out to me, there's an open investigation. I still have not heard anything from any investigator, federal or state.
Right. I've talked to some of my friends who are currently in federal law enforcement or retired from there, and they tell me that it's not a question of there not being enough evidence to initiate an investigation, but of the political will to do so. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Exactly, and that's where we get to the larger point here. This is a cultural media story unlike any we've had in recent years.
It sure is.
This is not simply, I mentioned James Traficant before. This is not simply a story of a corrupt politician. This is a story of how we deliberately failed to investigate a corrupt politician primarily because the media hated Trump to the point that they assumed this woman, because of her identity, must be good, in quote unquote. They assumed she must be of good character, someone to celebrate, and immediately started celebrating her because she was what they assumed Trump hated. The media and the culture at large and elected officials, law enforcement, just are overcome with the idea that they cannot investigate her because of her identity, and that certainly isn't the single-tier justice system we expect in this country. This is a failure unlike any other we've seen. It matters unlike any other issue of corruption we've seen, and I certainly hope this ends up being a tipping point among most Americans to finally get an uncensored view with perfect clarity of just how badly they failed and just how terrible their judgment was in protecting American citizens. I mean, we have, in short, the way I explain this is they failed perfectly. They decided that the way to make this a less corrupt, less hateful country is to usher in perhaps the most corrupt, most bigoted congressperson we've seen in decades. They could not have failed worse. It's so clear, and I really think because of that, this is going to be a tipping point.
Right, I sure hope so. And the failures are on multiple fronts. As you say, it's the failure of law enforcement, and it's the failure of the mainstream media to do the work that you and Preya and Scott have been so diligently doing for the last 3 years. Why? I can't thank you enough for coming on. Is there anything? Are there any sneak previews of forthcoming stories you can share with us right now?
Yes, I don't know when you're going to be posting this, but within a day or two, I will have a large story coming out with brand new information and brand new evidence of massive media failure. So I hope you all have your eyes open for that.
We'll sure be watching out for that. And again, I can't commend highly enough to our audience David Steinberg's work, multiple stories on this case. The last one, published July 18th, 2019 at powerlineblog.com, tying up loose threads in the curious case. David, thank you for your work on this. It is, as I say, from my perspective as a fellow investigator, it's phenomenal. And the way you've laid it out and it's a very tough story to convey orally, and I appreciate you're coming on to do that today. It's a complex story, but it's a fascinating story. And it involves a leader in our government who is empowered with making our immigration laws. I mean, this is the incredible, one of the more incredible aspects of the story, and she should be be investigated for multiple felonies, potential felonies, as you've described. Thanks again, David, and looking forward to your future work on this.
Thanks so much, Bill, and I do hope to do it again soon. I expect to, considering how much effort you've put into taking this one up, and to actually get some results here. A lot of journalists tend to feel useless after they break a story if nothing happens, and we certainly appreciate that Judicial Watch has added their voice to this and is pushing to actually get some results, to actually see something positive come of this gigantic failure.
Well, we'll stay on it too. I'd like to thank all of you and our audience for joining us for the story today. And as I say, it's a fascinating one. And if you'd like to donate to us, judicialwatch.org is our website. Obviously, you make our work possible, and it's vital. I humbly suggest that Judicial Watch has been a vital instrument in keeping our government honest, or as honest as it can be. Thank you once again.